Have you ever felt like everything was going perfectly, only to find a door suddenly slammed shut in your face? It's like you were walking down a smooth path, and then, boom, the door you've been knocking on for so long just won't budge. It's frustrating, disheartening, and even confusing. But what if I told you that these closed doors aren't just obstacles? What if they're actually part of a much greater plan? God's plan for your life. You see, sometimes we get so caught up in the rejection of closed doors that we miss the redirection they bring. What if the very door that was closed is the one that was keeping you from a bigger, more amazing blessing on the other side? You might be sitting there thinking, but why would God allow this? I've prayed, I've worked hard, I've trusted, and I get it. It's tough. The silence, the waiting, and the unanswered prayers can make it seem like God is nowhere to be found. But what if I told you that every moment of uncertainty, every closed door is a divine opportunity, an opportunity to grow spiritually, deepen your faith, and prepare for something much greater than you could have ever imagined? The secret lies in understanding that God's plan is always better than our own, and He is always working behind the scenes for our good, even when we can't see it. Life can feel like a series of doors closing in our faces, one after another. It's not uncommon to encounter setbacks, those dreams that seem to slip away, opportunities that vanish before we can seize them. You've probably had moments when you felt like you were so close, but it all fell apart, right? It's a tough pill to swallow, especially when it feels like everything is moving in the wrong direction. But remember, sometimes those doors close because something greater awaits on the other side, even if we don't see it yet. When we face these closed doors, it's easy to get stuck in frustration. The why me thoughts can cloud our minds. You may think that every time you try, the universe just says nope, but you're not alone in this journey. In the Bible, even the greatest figures experienced moments of doubt and despair. Think about the story of Joseph, who, despite facing betrayal, imprisonment, and countless hardships, eventually saw God's plan unfold in ways he couldn't have imagined. If God was with him, why wouldn't He be with you? Sometimes we get so fixated on what we've lost that we forget to look at what's ahead. It's like focusing on the rearview mirror when there's a vast road stretching out in front of us. The moment when a door slams shut might feel like a rejection, but it can often be a redirection. Just like an angel guiding you on a new path, that closed door might be God's way of preparing you for something much better, something you can't see right now, but will become clear in time. Think about how many times people have shared their testimonies, how a no led them to something more meaningful. The silence that comes with these moments of waiting can feel unnerving. But perhaps this silence is a gift, an opportunity for growth and reflection. Just like a gardener waiting for the seeds to sprout, you too are in a season of preparation. Sometimes, the hardest moments are the ones that refine us the most. God is molding you, shaping your faith, and teaching you how to trust even when the path doesn't seem clear. The Bible encourages us to seek His wisdom, to pray for patience in moments like these. Imagine yourself as clay in the hands of a potter. The potter knows exactly what the final masterpiece will look like, even if the process feels slow and painful at times. Every twist, every push, and every turn serves a purpose. When a door closes, think of it as a moment when the potter is gently reshaping you, removing old patterns to make way for something more beautiful. Trust the process, because you are becoming more than you can see right now. The key is to remember that growth doesn't happen overnight. Every moment of waiting, every no you encounter, is preparing you for something bigger. Think about it. We don't just grow when things go our way. We grow when we face challenges. And with each challenge, you become stronger in your faith. You begin to realize that God's plan is greater than any dream you had in mind. Through prayer and reflection, you start to see the opportunities hidden in these closed doors. No matter what, God's sovereignty reigns over every closed door. His wisdom surpasses ours, and His timing is always perfect. Even when you feel like everything is falling apart, He's guiding you towards new opportunities, new beginnings. Don't lose heart, the best is yet to come. The Bible assures us that when God closes one door, He opens another at just the right time. And when that time comes, you'll look back and see that this journey was all part of His divine plan. Trusting in God's plan can be one of the hardest things to do, especially when everything feels chaotic. When doors slam shut and life doesn't seem to be going as you hoped, it's natural to feel confused or frustrated. You might even question whether God is really looking out for you. But the truth is, His wisdom is beyond what we can understand. Sometimes the most frustrating moments are the ones that are part of His perfect timing, even if it doesn't make sense right away. Think about it this way. How many times have you made plans that didn't work out, only to realize later that they weren't the best for you? God sees the bigger picture. And even when we're feeling lost or disappointed, He's orchestrating a plan that's far better than anything we could imagine. In the Bible, we're reminded that God's ways are higher than ours, and His thoughts are beyond our comprehension. The confusion we feel now is nothing compared to the clarity we'll have in the future when we see how everything fits together. When life feels frustrating, it's easy to let doubt creep in. But consider this: just because you can't see the whole plan doesn't mean it's not unfolding right before your eyes. Think of the story of Esther. She didn't understand why she was in the palace at first, but God's plan was revealed in time. Sometimes we're placed exactly where we need to be, and all we need to do is trust that God is in control. Trusting in His plan is like trusting a map that leads to a destination you've never seen before. It's also important to remember that our understanding is limited, but God's wisdom is limitless. When we try to figure everything out on our own, we often end up more confused. That's why the Bible urges us to trust in God with all our hearts and lean not on our own understanding. In times of frustration, turning to prayer can help. Praying for peace, wisdom, and the ability to trust His guidance can ease the burden and open our hearts to the truth He's revealing. God's plan doesn't always align with our immediate desires, and that's where the real test lies. We may feel like our dreams are slipping away, but often, what we think we want is not what's best for us. You see, trusting in God means surrendering to His wisdom. It's like a pilot trusting their instruments while flying in thick fog. Just because we can't see ahead doesn't mean we're not being guided safely. Prayer can act as our instrument, helping us to stay steady and focused. During these moments of doubt, it's helpful to remember that God never abandons us. He doesn't leave us wandering aimlessly. Just because we can't see His plan doesn't mean He's not at work. The Bible promises that He works all things for good, even when we don't understand how. By leaning into faith and prayer, we can move forward, knowing that God is leading us on a path we're meant to walk, one step at a time. So, even when everything feels uncertain and unclear, trust that God's wisdom is greater than our own. His timing is always perfect, even when we can't see it. The frustration you feel now may be the very thing that leads to your breakthrough. Remember that with God, even confusion can be the beginning of a divine transformation. Trust Him and keep praying for His guidance because He knows what's best for you. It's so easy to assume that when a door closes, it's a rejection. The sting of not getting what we hoped for can feel like a personal blow. But what if that closed door isn't a no from God, but rather a redirection to something better? We often view setbacks as failures, but sometimes they're just God's way of protecting us from something that isn't meant for us. Just like a parent who shields their child from danger, God sometimes closes doors to lead us to places where we can grow and thrive. Have you ever looked back on something you thought you desperately wanted, only to realize later that it wasn't the right path? Maybe it was a job that fell through, or a relationship that ended, and at the time it felt devastating. But when you look back, you can see how those closed doors actually saved you from pain or disappointment. In the Bible, God often closed doors for His people in ways that didn't make sense at first. Think about how He closed the door to the Red Sea, only to open a miraculous path. What seemed like a barrier turned into the greatest breakthrough. Redirecting us isn't about punishment, it's about love and care. Imagine you're a child trying to touch a hot stove. Your parents' no isn't a rejection, it's a protection. Similarly, when a door closes, God may be protecting you from a path that would have led to harm. Sometimes we chase after things that aren't aligned with His purpose for us, and He uses those closed doors to steer us toward something better. It's not rejection, It's redirection. The concept of redirection is vital to grasp because it takes away the sting of failure. When God closes one door, it's often because there's a better opportunity waiting on the other side. Think of it like getting lost while driving. Sometimes, the wrong turn leads you to a better route that you didn't even know existed. That's what God's guidance feels like. When you trust Him, you begin to see that the doors He closes are opening you up to better things, even if they don't seem obvious at first. If you find yourself facing a closed door, take a moment to pause and reflect. Instead of seeing it as an obstacle, consider it an invitation to pray and seek God's direction. Ask Him for wisdom to understand the reason behind the closed door. Often, the redirection will become clear when you're ready to see it. And if you don't see it right away, that's okay. Trust that God is leading you where you need to go, even if the path looks different than what you expected. In the grand scheme of things, our lives are a tapestry woven with purpose. The doors that close don't just end a chapter, they prepare us for a new one that may lead us to even greater opportunities. The Bible reminds us that God works all things together for the good of those who love Him. Those closed doors? They're just part of His plan to position us exactly where we need to be, protected, redirected, and prepared for something more magnificent. The key is to stop seeing closed doors as signs of failure and start viewing them as invitations to trust God more deeply. Every time a door closes, it's a chance to ask, what is God guiding me toward now? And through prayer and reflection, you'll begin to see that each redirection is part of His divine purpose. In the quiet moments, when everything seems still and uncertain, it's easy to feel like God isn't speaking. Silence can feel uncomfortable, especially when we're used to constant movement and noise. But those moments of silence, they're not wasted. They're actually opportunities for growth. Just like a seed needs quiet and darkness to grow deep roots before it can sprout, your faith needs these times of stillness to deepen and strengthen. It's in these quiet seasons that you're able to learn how to trust God more completely. Think about it. In times of silence, we often find ourselves looking inward, evaluating where we are and where we want to go. It's easy to get distracted by the noise of life, but silence invites us to hear God more clearly. When everything around you feels like it's paused, take a moment to reflect on what God might be teaching you in the stillness. It's a time to pray, to listen, and to trust that He is working even when you don't hear Him right away. The Bible tells us that God often speaks in a still, small voice, and sometimes we need quiet to hear it. In the midst of frustration, it's tempting to rush past the silence, to fill the void with our own plans or distractions. But what if, instead of filling the silence with noise, you chose to lean into it? Think of it like waiting for a message from a friend. You don't keep calling them or texting them. You wait patiently for their response. That's what it's like with God. His silence doesn't mean He's absent. It often means He's preparing you for something even greater. Trusting during these quiet moments requires patience, but the reward is worth it. These moments of silence might also be God's way of teaching us how to rely on Him more deeply. When we're in the middle of a storm, it's easy to cry out for help. But when everything is calm, it's harder to focus on Him. However, it's during these calm moments that God's voice becomes clearer, and His plan for our lives is made more evident. Prayer becomes more meaningful, and we learn how to listen to His guidance. The Bible reminds us to be still and know that He is God. That stillness, that quiet time, is where real spiritual growth happens. One of the biggest lessons we can learn during the silence is patience. It's easy to grow impatient when we don't see immediate results, but true growth takes time. God isn't in a rush. You might be waiting for something big to happen, but in the meantime, He's developing your character, refining your faith, and teaching you how to trust His timing. The silence is His way of preparing you for something better. And during this waiting period, the more you lean into prayer and trust Him, the more you'll experience a deeper connection with Him. The beauty of these quiet moments is that they force us to focus on God, not our circumstances. When there's nothing else to distract us, we're able to truly hear His voice and understand His will for our lives. It's in these moments that we grow spiritually. learning to rely not on our own understanding, but on God's perfect wisdom. So instead of fearing the silence, embrace it as a time of transformation. It's during these quiet times that you'll experience the deepest levels of growth and trust. Silence can be uncomfortable, but it's in that discomfort that we often find our greatest growth. The longer you spend in those quiet moments, the more you'll come to appreciate the trust and connection that can only be built through stillness. Keep praying, keep listening, and know that God is working even when you can't hear Him. Have you ever felt like you're not quite where you want to be yet? Like you're in the middle of a transformation that doesn't make sense? The metaphor of being clay in the hands of the potter speaks directly to this feeling. Think about clay. It's shapeless, soft, and messy in its raw form. But when the potter begins to work with it, shaping it, molding it, it's a slow and sometimes painful process. Yet, it's through this very transformation that the clay becomes something beautiful and purposeful. In the same way, trusting God's process might feel uncomfortable, but it's shaping you into something greater. Just like a potter has a vision for the final product, God has a plan for your life, one that's better than you could ever imagine. But the process of getting there involves patience and trust. When you're in the middle of a difficult season, it might feel like you're being pressed, squeezed, or stretched in ways you don't understand. But this is the part of the process that's shaping you, building you, and preparing you for what's ahead. It's easy to become frustrated when things don't go according to your plan. But remember that God's plan is so much bigger and better than anything you could devise on your own. When you look at clay, it's not always clear what it will become. At first, it's just a lump of earth. But under the potter's skilled hands, that lump can become a beautiful vase or a useful bowl. In the same way, God works with us in ways we don't always see. Sometimes it feels like we're being pushed in directions we don't want to go. But those are often the moments where the most significant growth happens. Trusting God's process means trusting that every twist, every turn, and every challenge is for a greater purpose. Think about the Bible and how many of its great figures were molded over time. Joseph's dreams were shattered by betrayal, but it was that very betrayal that set him on the path to become a leader. King David was anointed to be king, yet spent years running from Saul, waiting for God's timing. Both were in seasons where they couldn't see the full picture, but they trusted God's process and grew through it. They were clay, and God was their potter. You too are in His hands, being shaped, refined, and prepared for a future that is more than you can currently see. Trusting the process isn't easy, especially when it seems like you're stuck or things are falling apart. But if you're in a season of transformation, you can trust that God is at work. The Bible reminds us that God is the Creator, and we are His masterpiece. Even when things feel messy or chaotic, He's molding you into something wonderful. The process may be slow, and you may feel uncomfortable at times, but remember, it's all part of His perfect plan. As you go through life, remember that you're always in the hands of the potter. Every challenge, every hard season is an opportunity for God to mold you into something better. Trust that He sees the bigger picture, and even though you may not understand the shaping process, you can rest in the fact that He's creating something beautiful in you. The potter's hands are loving and purposeful, and His vision for your life is far beyond what you could ever dream. The beauty of being clay in God's hands is that even when you feel broken, you're never beyond repair. God can reshape you, refocus you, and give you new purpose. So embrace the process, trust the potter, and allow Him to transform you into the person He has always intended you to be. When a door closes, it's easy to feel like the world is falling apart. Dreams seem to shatter, plans seem to stall, and it can feel like you've been left in the dark. But what if, instead of seeing closed doors as setbacks, you began to view them as opportunities for spiritual growth? Closed doors are not the end of the story. They're the beginning of something new, something better. They give us a chance to grow in faith, deepen our trust in God, and prepare for the bigger blessings He's preparing for us. In those moments when a door closes and we're left standing there, feeling confused or even hurt, it's important to remember that God's ways are higher than our ways. What might seem like a disappointment can actually be a divine detour leading us to something greater. The Bible tells us that God has plans to prosper us, not to harm us. So, when a door closes, it's not a rejection, it's a redirection. It's an invitation to step into a season of spiritual growth, learning to trust God even when we can't see the full picture. Viewing closed doors as opportunities for growth requires a shift in perspective. Instead of seeing them as losses, think of them as lessons. Every closed door teaches us something valuable about ourselves, about our faith, and about God's plan for us. Sometimes, the very thing we think we need isn't what God wants for us, and He closes the door to lead us to a better path. That's why it's so important to stay open to His guidance, especially when things don't go as planned. Think of it this way. Growth doesn't happen when everything is easy. Just like muscles grow stronger when they're stretched and challenged, your faith grows stronger when it's tested. Closed doors are often the tests that prepare us for greater blessings down the road. In the Bible, we see countless examples of people whose faith was refined in moments of struggle. Think of Abraham, who waited years for the promised child, or the Israelites, who wandered through the desert before reaching the promised land. Their faith was strengthened, and their character was shaped in the process. As you go through life, remember that every closed door is an opportunity to draw closer to God. It's a chance to develop your spiritual muscles and learn to trust Him more deeply. Instead of resisting or resenting the closed doors, embrace them as part of your spiritual development. Take this time to pray for insight, for patience, and for understanding. Trust that even though you don't understand why a door is closing, God is working behind the scenes to prepare you for what's ahead. Closed doors also teach us the importance of waiting. We live in a fast-paced world where everything is expected to happen immediately. But sometimes God calls us to wait, to sit in the discomfort of uncertainty, trusting that His timing is perfect. In these waiting moments, we grow in patience and faith. We learn that blessings often come when we are ready, not when we demand them. And as we wait, God uses the closed doors to prepare us for the much greater opportunities that lie ahead. So when faced with a closed door, take a moment to reflect on the opportunities it presents for your growth. It's not a setback. It's a setup for something greater. Embrace the discomfort, trust God's plan, and allow your faith to deepen as you walk through this season of preparation. It's easy to feel overwhelmed in times of uncertainty. Life often throws us curveballs. Things don't go according to plan, and it seems like nothing is working out. But in those moments, it's crucial to remember that God's sovereignty is unshakable. Even when we can't see the way forward, we can trust that He is in control. His care for us is unwavering, and at the right time, He will open new doors. Just like a parent who guides their child through the unknown, God holds our hand and walks with us, even when the path ahead feels uncertain. When everything seems foggy and unclear, that's when we need to lean into God's promises. The Bible assures us that He has a plan for us, a plan to prosper us and give us a future filled with hope. Even when it feels like we're standing still, God is moving us closer to His will for our lives. The closed doors you face today are not the end. They are simply a part of God's perfect timing. Trust that He is working behind the scenes, orchestrating everything for your good. The beauty of God's sovereignty is that it's not dependent on our understanding. We don't need to know all the details to trust that He is leading us in the right direction. In fact, sometimes it's in the moments of uncertainty that we are forced to surrender our own plans and trust in His. And that's where the true peace comes, the peace that surpasses understanding. It's not about having all the answers. It's about knowing that God has already mapped out the journey, and we're just walking in His steps. Sometimes we want things to happen on our own timeline, but God's timing is always perfect. Think about how many times in the Bible God acted at the exact right moment, even when it didn't seem like it. Moses didn't part the Red Sea until it was the perfect time, and Jesus didn't perform miracles until it aligned with God's plan. Similarly, your new door will open when it's the right time, not a moment too soon and not a moment too late. Until then, trust that God is preparing you for the blessings that lie ahead. If you're in a season of waiting, hold on to this truth. God is never late. He may not always act in the way you expect, but he will always act in the right time. Even in times of uncertainty, he is there with you, holding you close, guiding you through the waiting process. His care for you is personal and constant, and he has a plan for your life that is far better than anything you could have imagined on your own. It's in those moments of waiting and uncertainty that God can do some of his greatest work in our lives. He's refining us, teaching us patience, and growing our faith. So even when you can't see the next door opening, trust that God's care for you is real, and he will open the right doors at the perfect time. His sovereignty means that he is in control, and you are never alone in the waiting. As you walk through this season of uncertainty, remember, God is always at work, even when you can't see it. His promises stand firm, and his love for you is unshakable. Trust him, and know that when the time is right, he will open a door that will lead you into the next chapter of his perfect plan for your life. As you reflect on the closed doors in your life, ask yourself, what is God trying to teach me through this moment of uncertainty? Are you willing to trust that the seemingly closed doors are actually guiding you towards something better? Embrace the discomfort, trust the process, and keep your faith strong. Remember, God's sovereignty and care never fail. He's always at work, even when it's hard to see. So as you face the challenges ahead, stay open to his redirection and trust that he is preparing you for something amazing. If you've been inspired by this message, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who might be facing a closed door in their own life. And be sure to subscribe and activate notifications so you can continue learning how to navigate life with faith, trust, and spiritual growth. The next door might just be right around the corner. Let's walk toward it together.